Hello, my darlings. Madam Raven here with part 3 and the finale of My Favorite Actor Doesn't Exist Anymore by Dopabeane. About a week ago, my favorite actor, and for that matter, favorite shows, favorite movies, and best friend stopped existing. It goes beyond that. According to the information I found online, the entire world is different. I'm not a historian and don't know enough about the past from my timeline to fill in the gaps here, which is unfortunate. I think it would help me figure out what happened. Anyhow, shortly after I discovered my world stopped existing, the windows and doors of my apartment disappeared, with no way to mark the passage of day or night. I had no idea how much time passed. My cell phone was unreliable. One moment it said 0300, the next 1700, and then 1100. My laptop wasn't much better. It reported linear time, but sometimes a minute stretched endlessly, and sometimes 10 hours disappeared in the literal blink of an eye. Additionally, someone was lurking outside my apartment this entire time, trying to find a way in order to kill me. They weren't able to get in, but I wasn't able to get out. During this time, I received a strange series of IMs from someone who claims to be my missing friend, Ray. Maybe Ray told me to leave and board a very specific train in a very specific way. When I told him there was no way out of the apartment, he said to look for what was the same, and signed off after another creepy series of IMs. This was all good and well, except I'd be facing down a killer even if I escaped. Nevertheless, I took my friend's word to heart and obsessively went through everything in my apartment. I focused on the doors, bedroom, bathroom, closet. Those were the same, and each of those rooms had doors. Maybe those doors would open up to an exit. Of course, that didn't happen. And it makes sense. The rooms were part of the apartment. Given the absence of doors and windows, the apartment had changed significantly. Cupboards, pantries, and cabinets were the same. They were attached or built into the apartment, so they were part of it. What did I have that had a door and wasn't part of the apartment? My microwave? The oven? Then it finally hit me. The refrigerator. The refrigerator was the same, and it was mine. I'd brought it with me when I moved in. There was just one problem. I'd opened it frequently over the past several days to access my dwindling food supply. It was just a fridge. But I had nothing else to go on by that point, so I tried it. I approached the fridge with an almost feverish anticipation, half believing that my thoughts would be enough to turn my absurd hopes into reality. I finally opened it up and saw nothing but the same alarmingly empty shelves I'd been facing for days. Anger surged and overflowed. I'd started throwing the food and shelves everywhere. Glass shattered, food containers exploded all over the floor. Juice bottles burst on impact. Painfully aware of tears on my face, I braced both arms against the fridge and glared inside at the empty expanse of whiteness. I felt inexplicably betrayed. I'd built the fridge up into my last hope. It was ridiculous, but without it, I was forced to confront a very ugly and fundamental insane reality. I was trapped, and like all permanently trapped things, I was going to die. It was easier to stare at the back of the fridge than to contemplate this truth. Luckily, this meant I caught sight of a very odd, visually upsetting flicker on the fridge's back wall. Then it warped and stretched. The smooth white walls and unsettling artificial light remained, illuminating a corridor that looked endless. I weighed my options. I didn't know where I was or what, if anything, waited at the end of this new, ridiculous fridge corridor. Maybe it would spill me out in front of the man who was trying to get into my apartment to kill me. Maybe it went on forever and I was just trading one trap for another. But if I went inside, I had a chance. If I stayed here, I'd starve. So I left the fridge open and quickly packed a change of clothing, my wallet, phone, and computer. I filled the only intact bottle I had with tap water and packed it and my scant food supplies in the backpack. I dragged my kitchen table over to prop the fridge open. The last thing I needed was for the door to swing shut and throw that corridor into darkness, and stepped inside. My fridge is tall but narrow, and I started to feel claustrophobic very quickly. The harsh light played tricks on my eyes, creating shadows from nothing and imbuing the vast, bland whiteness with a nightmarish quality. My backpack kept bumping the sides. Each rustle and thud made my heart stop. About 5 minutes in, I tried to turn around, not to go back, just to look, and realized there wasn't enough room to turn. Suddenly desperate, I craned my neck. Far, far away, barely the size of a postage stamp, was the image of my food-covered kitchen. The wooden table glinted dully in the refrigerator's white light. I shuddered and kept on. After an indeterminate amount of time, all the light suddenly disappeared. I tried to whirl around and nearly trapped myself. Fighting panic and terror, I managed to face forward again. I scanned desperately for a glimpse of my kitchen, but I'd gone too far. Only darkness behind me and even more ahead. I thought about going back, but the notion of marching backward with a pitch-black tube of trans-dimensional darkness was worse than marching forward into a pitch-black tube of trans-dimensional darkness. So I continued. Just a few minutes later, I saw a tiny pinprick of light. No, 3 pinpricks, twinkling like stars straight ahead. I tried to run, but my backpack somehow kept lodging itself against the wall, acting like a finicky brake whenever I tried to move too fast. The tiny pinpoint of light grew with surprising speed. They appeared to be 3 open doorways. I frowned as I got closer. Fighting off a shudder, 2 of those doors appeared to lead into my kitchen. I slowed to a near crawl as I approached. One kitchen was the one I'd left, empty, filthy, coated in food and broken glass. The other led into a perfectly intact kitchen, neat, clean, and far from empty. A man sat at the table, head in his hands. Before him lay a pistol equipped with a silencer. So he'd gotten inside finally, but not the one I'd come from. The third window showed a grayish, empty room. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, illuminating an empty fold-out table, a recessed counter, and a door. I tried to run, but realized the utter foolishness of this plan. What if the man with the gun heard me? What if he came after me? I'd be a sitting duck. As if responding to my thoughts, the man suddenly stood up, grabbed his gun, and left the room. It seemed too good to be true, but what choice did I have? I kept going, keeping my focus on the gray room. Before long, I was a few scant yards away. Seized with a combination of inspiration and fear, I peered into the dirty version of my kitchen and closed the fridge door. The image winked out of sight. When I pressed experimentally at the place it had just been, I encountered nothing but empty darkness. No door, no wall. I reached out to close the second door, but the moment my hand left the corridor, a muffled thump reached my ears as hot agony exploded over my palm. I looked down and saw blood. The man stepped in front of me. We regarded each other for a flat, eerie second. Then I shrank away. He shot at me again, but the bullet didn't pass the threshold of the fridge corridor. I pulled the door shut. A bullet shot past my arm, narrowly missing it, and then it was done. The door was closed, replaced with the same empty, reassuring darkness. I ran into the gray room. My feet slapped concrete, a jarring change after the hollow-sounding plastic of the corridor. My eyes adjusted to the relative dimness as adrenaline waned and the pain in my hand grew. Steeling myself, I looked down. The bullet had grazed me and taken off a wide strip of skin. It stung like hell, but it was superficial. I quickly washed my wound in the sink, drawing a hissing breath as the cold water seemingly set every nerve in my hand on fire. Then I cupped my hands and drank directly from the faucet. No point wasting my single bottle of water, and finally had a closer look at my surroundings. It was an empty break room. A few small tables, a counter with a sink and microwave, and a bulletin board papered with notices, disclosures, and posters. The depressing industrial ambiance set me on edge. A thick layer of dust coated everything. Cheap dishes were arranged by the sink. They looked brittle and old. I turned to the bulletin board. Everything there looked similarly ancient. I leaned in curiously. Birthday cards, gift exchange, retirement notices, work disclosures actually began to crumble when my breath hit them. I stepped back uneasily. It was wrong. The whole room was wrong. But unlike my apartments, there was a door and no murderer to be found. I jiggled the door handle experimentally. It was stiff, but finally turned. Rust flaked from the knobs as the door creaked open. It was another corridor, with a concrete floor, cinder block walls, and buzzing white lights. The hall stretched endlessly in either direction. No rooms or doors except for the one I just exited. I thought about going back inside the fridge, about reversing my steps, but then what? Back to the doorless, windowless trap? Back to my would-be killer? Nevertheless, I used a chair to prop the break room open before picking a direction and setting off. My first assessment had been wrong. While there were no doors and no end in sight, corridors split off from the main hall, so expertly done they weren't even visible till you were on top of them. Each of these split-offs were marked with the words P.O.D. and a combination of letters and numbers. The first one I came across bore the sign P.O.D.F.C.H.O.M. 3409. I walked for what felt like hours. I even tried checking my phone, but it was useless as ever, and wouldn't let me set the timer. I had no way to judge time. The corridor showed no signs of terminating. Finally, I was so exhausted and scared that when I came across yet another POD alcove, I decided to have a look. Compared to the main corridor, this was a short hall, less than 30 yards, and lined with airtight metal doors. A few had small, dusty windows near the top. Against my better judgment, it's crazy the things we'll do to try and alleviate well-found terror, even when the alleviation is the worst thing you can do. I stood on my tiptoes and peered into one. I found myself staring at a tiny, stark, well-lit room. A man stood in the center with his back to me. He trembled faintly, Longish hair, dark red shot with gray, tumbled to his shoulders. Another window, nearly as small as the one I was peering into, was set into the wall opposite me. I caught a glimpse of a pale green sky and a rolling black ocean. In the distance, brown storm heads gathered over an incomprehensible mass. It was too small and I was too far to make sense of it, but the little I saw made my stomach feel loose and watery. The man looked over his shoulder. I gasped. He was older but exquisitely handsome. Cheekbones cast shadows, and sea-green eyes glittered in the harsh light. Then he smiled, lips stretching all the way up his cheeks and bearing several rows of crowded teeth. His teeth weren't sharp or oddly shaped, but that was almost worse than the alternative. The sheer number and arrangement of those otherwise normal teeth, combined with his almost alien beauty, wasn't right. My lizard brain was screaming that I wasn't looking at a human being. At best, it was an inexpert facsimile, a kind of coat worn by something else. At worst, I didn't want my mind to finish the thought. I reared back and retraced my steps to the main corridor, resolutely ignoring the other doors. I couldn't remember which way I'd come. Somehow I stayed calm, picking the direction that seemed most likely, and continued walking. Long after my legs and hips began to ache, I finally came across another offshoot hall. Rather than a POD designation, it was marked with administration. I ducked in immediately and saw more doors, at least a dozen on either side. I tried a door at random. It didn't budge. Another, none opened. I ran up and down, frantically pushing and kicking each door I passed. Finally, towards the end, I saw a larger door with a placard attached. Exit. To your required place of being. This facility bears no responsibility as to your destination. I pushed the door. It slid open, blinding me with the bright, brilliant, warm daylight of a clear mid-morning. I stepped out. The door swung shut, leaving me in the foyer of an enormous, bustling library that I knew very well. I turned around and saw I'd just exited through the ladies' bathroom. On impulse, I opened it up and looked in. Just a normal, multi-stall restroom, complete with tiled floor and unmistakable odor of a public bathroom. Directly ahead, I saw a towering statue of a black bear with her cubs. Beyond that was the children's library. To the side were the checkout counters. And after that, the rest of the library unfolded more or less according to my memory. I spent most of my after-school hours here, all through high school, and a great deal of my free time here as an adult. It's a 10-minute drive from my apartment and, more importantly, I think, a short walk from the Bakersfield Amtrak station. I gathered myself and found an empty table upstairs. I tried to look up my apartment, but it doesn't exist anymore. So I'll wait here at the library. It closes long before 11 p.m., but it's safe. When it closes, I'll find a place to eat and stay there as long as I can. Around 10 p.m., I'll make my way to the Amtrak station. And with any luck, I'll be boarding a train tonight. I hope it takes me home. So quoth this raven. Now, my darlings, if you enjoyed this, please like and let me know. Please subscribe and ring the little bell so you'll know when to come back. And if you leave me a comment, I promise I'll reply.